A heartbreaking loss in the world of country music. Singer Naomi Judd of the Grammy-winning mother-daughter duo The Judds has died.
Naomi Judd's death came as a shock to the world, but the autopsy report revealed even more unsettling details. There were scars, silence, and a note that reportedly pointed blame at her own daughter. Behind the glamorous exterior was a woman enduring unseen pain, while her family quietly unraveled. What really occurred during Naomi's final hours, and what dark secrets did she take with her? This is the side of the Judd story that was never captured on camera. Let's uncover it. Naomi Judd was one of the most familiar faces in country music. Her bright smile and glittering success masked a history of deep pain that her fans rarely saw. While her death shocked many, what followed left people speechless. The autopsy not only confirmed long-held fears, it uncovered things no one expected. How did a country music icon end up alone, covered in scars, with a farewell note that reportedly blamed her daughter? And how could someone so cherished by fans be struggling with such overwhelming darkness for so long? To grasp the significance of what the autopsy revealed, we must look at the Judd family itself. Naomi wasn't just a celebrity, she was the cornerstone of what many saw as country music's royal family. Her journey to fame was hard-earned. Born Diana Ellen Judd in 1946, Naomi worked as a nurse in Nashville before ever performing. Everything changed when she and her daughter Winona began singing together. Their voices, Naomi's warm tone paired with Winona's powerful delivery, blended into something uniquely timeless and emotionally raw. They became the Judds and quickly rose to stardom. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, their music was everywhere. With hits like Mama He's Crazy, Why Not Me, and Grandpa, Tell Me About the Good Old Days, they didn't just top charts, they defined the era. Their songs struck a chord with listeners, offering stories that felt real and relatable. In a period of transition for country music, the Judds gave it soul. Over their career, they sold more than 20 million records, won 5 Grammys, and scored over a dozen #1 hits on the country charts. To fans, they were more than musicians. Naomi and Winona symbolized resilience, a mother and daughter facing fame side by side, lifting each other up. But behind the scenes, this picture-perfect image was often held together more by effort than harmony. Their relationship was intense and, at times, volatile. Despite their deep love for each other, tensions often ran high. The stress of fame, constant touring, and unresolved personal trauma strained their bond in ways few saw. Both Naomi and Winona would later speak about their conflicts, emotional blow-ups, and the stretches of silence that sometimes lasted for months. Naomi's relationship with her younger daughter, Ashley Judd, was also difficult. Ashley found success in Hollywood but has spoken openly about growing up in what she described as a chaotic household. She shared publicly that she often felt alone as a child and experienced emotional instability at home. These weren't mere tabloid stories, they were confirmed through interviews and memoirs. At the heart of all this was Naomi, a woman who smiled for the world while privately falling apart. Naomi struggled with severe mental health issues throughout her life, including depression, anxiety, and later, bipolar disorder. She didn't keep this to herself. In fact, she was one of the few artists of her time to openly discuss such diagnoses. But acknowledging pain isn't the same as healing from it. Over time, it became more and more evident that beneath her polished public persona was someone in deep emotional distress. After a long and celebrated career, Naomi stepped away from performing in 1991 following a hepatitis C diagnosis, a disease she reportedly contracted while working as a nurse. Doctors initially gave her only a few years to live. However, Naomi defied expectations, entered remission, and began advocating for mental health. She authored books, appeared in interviews, and regularly spoke about the importance of treating mental illness with seriousness. Yet, despite helping others, she was still fighting a losing battle within herself. Then, in 2022, Naomi made an unexpected return to the spotlight. She and Winona announced a farewell tour, a final celebration of their legacy. For fans, it was a joyful moment. For Naomi, it brought pressure she might not have been ready to face. The announcement came just weeks before her death. In retrospect, those close to her noticed signs. She appeared overwhelmed, unpredictable, and emotionally drained. What happened next was devastating. Just one day before the Judds were to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Naomi was found dead in her home. When the autopsy results were made public weeks later, they confirmed the heartbreaking truth: Naomi Judd had died by suicide. But that wasn't the only revelation. The condition in which her body was found, the substances in her system, and the physical evidence at the scene all painted a more complex and troubling picture than anyone had imagined. The details of that day left even those who thought they were prepared completely stunned. The report didn't just confirm that Naomi had taken her own life, it laid bare the intimate, painful facts of her final hours. It read like a personal confession, filled with details that lifted the veil on one of country music's most beloved icons. The specifics, including the exact location of the fatal wound, offered a chilling glimpse into her final moments and the weight of what she had been carrying for years. The old surgical scars. The substances detected in her system. And perhaps most heartbreaking of all, a handwritten note said to be addressed to her daughter Winona, casting blame in her final moments. Why would a woman, just hours away from receiving one of the highest honors of her life, induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, choose to end it all? According to the official report from the Nashville Medical Examiner's Office, Naomi Judd was found by her family in her home on April 30, 2022. At exactly 10:57 a.m. emergency responders were called immediately, and she was taken to Williamson Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead at 12:35 p.m., just hours after being discovered. She had been scheduled to be inducted into the Hall of Fame with Winona the following day. The medical details in the report are clinical but deeply disturbing. The injury entered from the right side of her scalp, 2.5 inches below the crown of her head and nearly 5 inches to the right of her midline. It passed through critical parts of the brain, the frontal and temporal lobes, responsible for decision-making and emotions, before exiting 2 inches below the crown and over 5 inches to the left of the midline. The trajectory moved slightly upward from right to left. No foreign object remained in the skull, indicating a complete exit. These kinds of details are typically read only by forensic professionals, but in this case, they were made public, revealing not only how Naomi died but also shedding light on her final moments. At the time, she was wearing white pants with a safety pin securing the waistband, a white shirt, and a blue robe. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Her hands hadn't been covered or preserved for evidence, a step usually taken if foul play is suspected. This strongly pointed to a self-inflicted act. Investigators also noted a blue bedsheet and pillow, both of which were taken with her to the hospital, further supporting the conclusion that her final moments occurred alone, at home. Some of the most surprising details in the report were not about how Naomi died, but about the condition of her body. The report noted evidence of several cosmetic surgeries. A linear scar ran across her scalp from above the right ear, over the crown, and ended near the left temple, consistent with a facelift. Smaller scars around her eyes suggested eyelid surgery. Her eyebrows, lips, and hairline had been tattooed with permanent makeup, a cosmetic technique also used by celebrities like Michael Jackson to address hair thinning or to create the illusion of a full hairline when wearing wigs. She also had breast implants, confirmed by both physical and internal examination. A scar from a tummy tuck stretched from hip to hip, and other surgical marks were visible on her knees, possibly indicating cosmetic procedures or corrective surgeries. Her fingernails were manicured with French-tipped acrylics, and her toenails painted soft pink. Even in her late 70s, she maintained the appearance of a dedicated performer. But the substances found in her body told a more complex story than one of appearances alone. Toxicology tests revealed a combination of strong psychiatric and neurological medications, venlafaxine, trazodone, primidone, memantine, and MCPP. These were not recreational drugs, they're prescribed for serious conditions including major depression, bipolar disorder, insomnia, seizures, and cognitive issues like Alzheimer's. Venlafaxine is a commonly prescribed antidepressant. Trazodone treats depression and anxiety but can cause significant sedation. Primidone, an anticonvulsant, suggested either a seizure disorder or use as a mood stabilizer. Memantine, typically used for Alzheimer's and other dementias, raised concerns about early cognitive decline. MCPP, M-chlorophenylpiperazine, is a psychoactive substance that affects serotonin levels. It can be a byproduct of certain medications or indicate a drug interaction. While not illegal, it can mimic the effects of stimulants or hallucinogens, and its presence often points to either complex drug interactions or metabolic complications. Simply put, Naomi was managing a risky and powerful mix of medications, each capable of causing confusion, sedation, or emotional imbalance. Taken together, they may have intensified feelings of hopelessness. This matched the behavior noticed by those close to her in the weeks before her death. Friends and family had observed increased emotional volatility, fatigue, and erratic behavior. The stress of an upcoming return to the spotlight, despite her fragile state, may have pushed her into psychological crisis. The farewell tour had just been announced, and though the honor of her Hall of Fame induction was imminent, the pressure may have felt overwhelming. One of the most sensitive parts of the report involves a note found near her. Though its full contents haven't been officially disclosed, it has been widely reported to contain emotional and possibly accusatory remarks aimed at Winona. Fans who long believed Naomi and Winona shared an unbreakable bond were shaken by the idea that her final message might contain criticism toward her daughter. It introduced painful questions that may never be answered. Behind all the medical language and public scrutiny lies a quiet, undeniable truth: Naomi Judd was suffering. Physically, emotionally, and mentally, she was exhausted. She had spent years battling bipolar disorder, endured the lingering effects of hepatitis C, and faced a diagnosis of chronic lung inflammation that made singing more difficult. The pressure of a comeback, the weight of public expectations, and the millions watching her every move became overwhelming. The biggest mystery remains: why did it happen then? Why just before receiving such a prestigious honor? Why when she was already deep into planning a farewell tour? These are questions no medical report can answer. But they do reveal the immense pressure of living in the public eye, the fragile line between joy and despair, and how a legend can disappear, not through scandal, but in silence. "I miss her, but we just don't talk." That one sentence revealed a hidden truth, the deep emotional distance that had grown between them in recent years. Naomi Judd was known for her public warmth, honesty about mental health, and charm on stage. But behind closed doors, things were not so seamless. Winona and Naomi had spent decades touring together, yet their once close bond had begun to fray long before Naomi's final days. Winona has openly spoken about her experience of survivor's guilt, a feeling that often follows the sudden loss of a loved one, especially when the relationship was complicated. It's a deep, lingering sense of responsibility for having survived when someone else didn't. For Winona, it's not just about losing her mother. It's about continuing to perform, live her life, and care for her family with the painful knowledge that Naomi is gone. She admits that this feeling hasn't faded. Adding to the pain was the emotional distance between them at the time of Naomi's passing. There was no argument or dramatic split, just space that slowly grew wider. Winona describes losing her mother as not one moment of grief, but a slow, surreal unraveling. "She's at home probably wondering where I'm at, what I'm doing," she once said with a trembling voice. "I think she misses the road." Her words are powerful. Winona wasn't only grieving her mother's absence, she imagined Naomi still spiritually tied to the stage. According to Winona, Naomi thrived on attention, performances, and crowds. She believes her mother needed the spotlight even more than she did. "She loves a crowd," Winona said. "Even more than I do." Unlike Naomi, Winona has always seen herself as more introverted, valuing music and family over fame. Yet for years, she stood beside her mother on stage, maintaining the illusion that all was well, even when it wasn't. So, why the emotional divide at the end? Winona once said that being part of a mother-daughter musical duo is nothing like a regular family bond. It's intense and complicated. They weren't just relatives, they were co-workers, roommates, business partners, and performers. That kind of closeness can either deepen a relationship or make it unbearably strained. In her grief, Winona has revealed how hard it is to mourn someone when there was no closure. She describes her feelings as a mix of silence and confusion. There were no final words of peace, no last moment of forgiveness or clarity. And that has made healing even harder. In public, Winona has continued to honor her mother's legacy. She still sings their songs, speaks about mental health, and has vowed to complete the farewell tour they had planned. But in private, she has confessed that her grief is far more complicated than people realize. She's described feeling profoundly isolated since Naomi's death. While the world mourned a music icon, Winona grieved a mother she struggled to truly reach. They had shared so much: chart-topping hits, world tours, emotional crises, hospital visits, and therapy. And yet, in the end, much remained unsaid. In one of her most heartfelt interviews, Winona reflected, "I didn't expect to cry. I think just because I'm a mom right now, and dealing with teenagers, and paybacks are hard." It was a quiet, intimate moment, a daughter trying to understand the woman who raised her, loved her, challenged her, and ultimately left behind more questions than answers. Just when it seemed that Winona Judd had endured all the grief one person could handle, tragedy struck again, this time within her own home. Her husband, musician Cactus Mosa, suffered a sudden medical event that left him unable to move the left side of his body. For Winona, it meant shifting roles from mourning daughter to full-time caregiver almost instantly. At first, Winona kept the details private, revealing only that Cactus had lost the use of his left side. It was a shocking revelation. Fans were used to seeing him perform effortlessly beside her, full of life and energy. He was more than just her spouse, he was part of her musical journey. Suddenly, he became someone who needed help with even the most basic movements. The impact was immediate and profound. Their home had to be remodeled with ramps, handrails, and specialized equipment. But the emotional weight was heavier still. In a raw moment, Winona described helping him stand in the shower, holding him up to prevent him from falling. "We're supposed to be doing this at 80, she said softly. "Not now." That single line captured everything. It wasn't just about illness, it was about the loss of time, of dreams, and of a future that had been rewritten in an instant. She was overwhelmed, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Years of battling bipolar disorder, coping with the after-effects of hepatitis C, and dealing with a chronic lung condition that made singing harder had taken their toll. The pressure of making a comeback, being under constant public scrutiny, and knowing millions were watching became too much to bear. Yet, the lingering question remains, why did it happen then? Why right before receiving such a major honor? Why, when she was already preparing for a farewell tour? These are not questions that tests or diagnoses can answer. What they do expose is the crushing weight of performing in the public eye, the delicate line between happiness and despair, and how a legend can fade, not through scandal, but through silence. "I miss her, but we just don't talk." That one line captured a reality fans rarely saw, the deep emotional distance that had grown between them in recent years. While Naomi Judd was admired for her warmth, her candidness about mental health, and her magnetic presence on stage, life behind closed doors was far more complicated. Winona and Naomi had shared the stage for decades, but the close bond they once had begun to erode well before Naomi's final days. Winona has openly spoken about experiencing what she calls survivor's guilt, a psychological response often triggered by the sudden loss of someone close, especially when the relationship was complicated. This type of guilt involves a lingering sense of responsibility for having survived something another person didn't. For Winona, it wasn't just about losing her mother, it was about continuing her life, career, and family responsibilities while carrying the weight of Naomi's absence. And by her own admission, that burden has never lifted. What made it even harder was that they hadn't been speaking regularly at the time of Naomi's death. There was no major conflict or falling out, just a slow, growing emotional gap that neither seemed able to bridge. Winona described the loss not as a sharp moment of grief, but as a long, surreal process of coming undone. "She's at home probably wondering where I'm at, what I'm doing," she once said with a trembling voice. "I think she misses the road." That thought is telling. Winona wasn't only grieving the loss of her mother, she was imagining her still longing for the spotlight. She believed Naomi had an even stronger attachment to the stage than she did. "She loves a crowd," Winona said, "even more than I do. Unlike her mother, Winona has always described herself as more introverted, preferring the focus on music and family rather than fame. Yet for years, she stood next to Naomi in the public eye, keeping up the appearance that everything was fine, even when it wasn't. So, why did the emotional divide grow between them? Winona once explained that being in a mother-daughter music duo is far from an ordinary family bond, it's intense and layered. They were not only relatives, but co-workers, housemates, business partners, and performers. That kind of closeness can either strengthen a relationship or create unbearable strain. In the aftermath of Naomi's passing, Winona's reflections reveal how difficult it is to grieve someone when there's no sense of closure. She described her emotional state as a mix of silence and uncertainty. There were no final words, no goodbye moment of peace or reconciliation, making it even harder to move forward. In public, Winona has done her best to carry on her mother's legacy. She performs their songs, advocates for mental health awareness, and has even committed to completing the tour they had planned together. But in private, she's admitted the grieving process has been far more complicated than most people realize. Since Naomi's passing, Winona has felt a deep sense of emotional isolation. While fans mourned the loss of a beloved artist, Winona mourned the absence of a mother she never fully knew how to reach. Despite all they went through, chart-topping success, global tours, personal breakdowns, hospital visits, and family counseling, there were still things left unsaid. In one particularly emotional interview, Winona shared something simple but deeply moving: "I didn't expect to cry. I think just because I'm a mom right now, and dealing with teenagers, and paybacks are hard." It was a quiet, vulnerable moment, just a daughter trying to make sense of the woman who raised her, challenged her, and ultimately left her with more questions than answers. And then, just as it seemed Winona had endured all the sorrow she could, tragedy struck again, this time in her own home. Her husband, fellow musician Cactus Mosa, suffered a sudden medical event that left the left side of his body paralyzed. Overnight, Winona went from being a grieving daughter to a full-time caregiver. At first, she revealed very little, only saying that he had lost the use of his left side. That news alone shocked fans. For years, they had watched Cactus perform with her, full of life and energy. He wasn't just her partner in marriage, he was part of her musical world. Suddenly, he needed help just to move through their home. The change was profound. Their house had to be adapted to his new mobility needs, ramps, rails, and special equipment became part of their routine. But the emotional shift was even more intense. In one vulnerable moment, Winona shared how she had to hold him upright in the shower so he wouldn't fall. "We're supposed to be doing this at 80, she said softly. "Not now." That single line speaks volumes. It's not just about illness or physical limitation, it's about stolen time, disrupted plans, and the painful rewriting of a shared future. She is a mother of two, deeply rooted in a domestic routine, balancing the challenges of raising teenagers while caring for her husband, who now faces physical disabilities. Ashley, on the other hand, is single, childless, and continues to explore the world. Her career has spanned work as a global humanitarian, actress, and political activist. Their daily lives couldn't be more different. Winona once put it simply: "If she's texting me from Scotland, that's just our life. We don't see each other." There was no anger in her words, only acceptance. Their emotional distance is further complicated by the family history they both share. Winona discovered a painful truth at 30, that the man she believed to be her biological father was not. This secret, kept from her for years by Naomi, deeply unsettled Winona's sense of self. Ashley, however, learned about her father much earlier. This uneven sharing of family secrets created an additional emotional rift. For Winona, it felt like a betrayal; for Ashley, it was simply part of her life experience. Their public responses after Naomi's passing also revealed their divide. Ashley offered a carefully crafted tribute, highlighting their mother's advocacy and efforts to destigmatize mental illness. Winona, in contrast, appeared overwhelmed and emotional, often pausing mid-interview as she struggled with her grief. While Ashley presented herself with calm and purpose, Winona was caught in sorrow and reflection. These contrasting ways of handling pain mirror the emotional barrier that has existed between them for years. Neither sister has pointed to a specific argument that drove them apart. Instead, the gap between Winona and Ashley Judd grew from years of unmet emotional needs, conflicting expectations, and the heavy legacy left by a mother who was both cherished and challenging. Naomi Judd's battles with mental health affected more than just herself, they transformed the family's emotional foundation. Both daughters grew up in this difficult environment and found their own ways to cope, though their methods were very different. Winona has been candid, "We are broken. And blessed. But mostly broken." It's a raw and honest statement that reflects a reality many families face but seldom express. The issue isn't a lack of love, it's that love can come with burdens too heavy to bear. For Winona and Ashley, those burdens remain unresolved between them. When people hear that two sisters mourning the same mother struggle to communicate, they often assume jealousy or bitterness is to blame. But in the Judd family, it feels more like exhaustion. Both have spent years dealing with fame, trauma, and personal growth under the harsh eye of the public. While there is no active conflict, there is also no clear way for them to reconnect.